Hey, what's going on, Team Trek family? Welcome back to another episode. In the studio today, I've got Sarah Williams, a U.S. Air Force veteran and CEO of Firewatch Magazine, a publication dedicated to telling veterans stories about transition and what they're doing next. Sarah Williams, welcome to Team Trek Podcast.
Thank you, Ryan. It's great to be here.
No, I very much appreciate you coming out. So I'm excited to get into what Firewatch Magazine is. I know it's going to help a ton of people. It already is. So excited to do that. But before we get into that, I want to start with where you're from and where you started off. So let's just get into it. Where are you from?
Let's step back a few years. I grew up in a small town in northern Minnesota on Lake Superior, very cold, and about 1,200 people in that town. I was the firstborn of a 3-daughter family, and my parents moved me up there when I was less than a year old from Wisconsin. My dad worked for the Forest Service, and my mom raised us kids. So the first couple of years, we learned how to survive in the winter, and I have memories somehow. Maybe it was the stories my parents told me, but the first 2 years we were up there, we were in a cabin in the woods and went through those winters with no plumbing and no electricity. It was a wood-burning stove, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night and my sheets would be stuck to the walls. But the craziest memory I have is walking out to the outhouse in the morning, and I'd have my onesie on and my favorite stuffed animal, and one time I dropped that stuffed animal down the hole.
Oh, no.
So just to this day, I hate going into porta potties or outhouses because I get that image and that feeling of loss from losing my favorite stuffed animal.
Yeah, that would leave a lasting memory for sure. So that was, okay, if I understood that correctly, your first year, you were in Minnesota.
Basically.
Okay, and you said 1,200 people in the town there for a year, and then you moved to Wisconsin.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was born in Wisconsin, and then when I was a year, we moved to Minnesota.
Maybe I got that backwards.
That's okay. And then I was in Minnesota until 18 when I left.
So stayed in the same town from about 2 years old until you left at 18.
Yes.
Okay, so Minnesota, what's that like? I know it's cold. Outside of that, what are you doing as a kid?
I was very outdoorsy. The next daughter in our family wasn't born until 7 years after I entered the picture. And, those were the days before we had one TV station. If it wasn't on NBC, I wasn't watching it. And to this day, I never got to watch Sesame Street, but that's okay. Because that was on a different channel.
That is crazy. So you had one channel, because we're the same age.
Yeah.
And I remember Sesame Street.
Yeah.
But you only had NBC. So what did that leave you with then? What do you remember? Was that Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
Scooby-Doo was my favorite.
Okay.
And it was also bunny ears, so we didn't always get even the best TV picture. So I say that to say that, and I was a daddy's girl big time. Dad would spend a lot of the time in the garage and outdoors. When we finally moved into a normal house, we were still burning wood. And so one of my chores was helping bring wood inside. And he would chop it, I would put it in the wheelbarrow and help bring it into the house.
So daddy's girl, what did Dad do for work?
He worked for the Forest Service and with timber.
Okay.
Northern Minnesota.
So Forest Service, timber. So what does that look like?
So he worked in the Superior National Forest, which is basically the top half or third of Minnesota. And so his job was 90% outdoor. Show up at his desk, figure out the plan for the day, and then he'd spend his entire day walking timber lots, working with loggers, surveys, and he would also deploy for forest fires and work with helicopter crews out in other states, mostly California, wherever there was a forest fire, he'd go deploy for those. But when he was home, I was latched on to Dad, and he worked on his cars in the garage a lot. So I grew up learning the difference between a Phillips and a had all the different tools.
So the difference between a Phillips and a flathead, all the tools.
Yes.
Okay, let's get into that.
Yeah, and I started to segue there as well. I was big into outdoor things. I didn't know there was a place like Florida back then. All I knew was the snow and the cold, so I learned to become accustomed to it. So I would have all my forts outside. We had German Shepherds. My dogs would go to my forts with me, and we had sledding hills. My dad made a sled at one point where I'd sit, those little cheap, those red plastic ones, and
The roll-up sleds or the ones with the rails on them?
the plastic flimsy kind.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So he would tie that to one of the dogs and pull me around the yard, and I had a blast.
Perfect. So getting into middle school, high school, what kind of kid were you? Were you tomboyish?
Yes, I was very much a tomboy. I also got into Girl Scouts, and fourth grade was probably the hardest time of my middle schooler growing up, because I started to I wasn't in the popular clique.
Okay.
And I started to get more into my academics. I remember getting teased for wearing the Girl Scout uniform to school, and I wouldn't wear it anymore. I remember one time Dad dropped me off on his motorcycle at a Girl Scout meeting, and the kids would tease me. It was just crazy stuff like that. But in the fourth grade is when I really think in my brain something started to solidify of this defiance to people that were going to try and put me down. And I started to develop this barrier against that. And that kind of followed me through life. But I've tried to flip it into a good way, into let's rise above these a-holes and do good in life.
And okay, so as you explain that, so from the early ages of around fourth grade, you started to realize that the kids are going to be evil.
Yes.
Like, to put it in the easiest terms you can, kids are mean to each other, especially at that age, and they're going to say stuff that they shouldn't. But you learned early on to be able to take that, you kind of turn it into something good. Can you kind of carry on with what you mean by that?
Sure. I started to develop this resilience, and one of their nicknames was Fish Lips. Back in the days where it was not popular to have full
Sure.
lips, right? And so let's fast forward about 8th grade. I did not want to stay in this town. I wanted to get out of the state. I wanted to see the world and do things. And I went to my guidance counselor, and she said, well, you should. And I said, but I also want to do college too. And I knew nothing about the military. I didn't know the difference between officer, enlisted, the services, absolutely nothing. No military. Well, further on back with grandparents, but no immediate military history in my family.
So we hadn't talked about your mom yet. What about your mom?
She worked, she started teaching preschool when we first moved up there, and then our Montessori school. She was a Montessori teacher. And then, but when we came into the picture, she was raising us 100%, and she did part-time work at a library.
Okay, so she was an educator already then. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, yeah. So Dad's in the Forest Service, Mom's an educator, and I know you said your younger siblings didn't come into the picture till later on. Mm-hmm. So there's a decent gap there. So no military background in the family at all, but no. You felt you started feeling a calling towards it early on.
Well, yeah, 2 words: Top Gun.
Okay. That sums it up. That I was into that too. I thought I was going to play football at the Air Force Academy and fly jets. Anyway, yeah, it's not my story; it's yours. So you saw Top Gun. What was it about Top Gun?
The energy, the mission, the dedication, and Tom Cruise.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, it was. I think that movie sold it for that whole generation of kids, right? It was awesome. Goes to show you how important advertising is, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so going through, let's get into high school. What were you like in high school? What kind of clubs were you involved in?
Sure, I was a skier, and this is a good story too. My parents got me into cross country skiing in high school. And it bought me all the stuff. It was a big big thing in that area of the state. And I hated it. It was so boring. I'm like, "Ugh, it's a lot of work." I said, I want to do the downhill ski team. My parents said, that's for the rich kids. And I'm like, well, that's what I want to get into. It looks like a lot more fun.
Right.
And they said, okay, go get a job. I was 15, so I went and got a job. I started working at a pizza restaurant. And then a year later, I bought my downhill skis and all the things and the ski pass and started downhill skiing. And then I did that for 4 years throughout high school, slalom racing.
So you worked to ski. You were a ski bum.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah. So skiing was my big sport. I was more into individual sports versus team sports and just doing my own thing. So skiing was really the one that I put the most time and effort into. But from the academic realm, skiing wasn't going to get me out of Minnesota, right? So guidance counselor said, I think you should apply for a service academy. You can do college and the military all in one. I said, that sounds good. So I applied to Coast Guard, Navy, and Air Force junior year. And then I started going through all the motions of things that I needed to do to be competitive. National Honor Society, captain of the ski team, or Business Professionals of America was a big one. They told me to just be diverse. The grades were one thing, but there was so many more things that I needed to be competitive for those applications. My backup plan was to go to veterinary school. So
okay.
It was going to be one or the other.
So now tell me more about, so you applied Army, all the services, is that what you said? Or
Coast Guard, Navy, and Air Force. Sorry, Army. I don't know why I didn't apply to the Army.
Get out. Okay. So Coast Guard, I can see, Top Gun was on a boat, right? So Coast Guard, Air Force makes sense. And what was the other one?
Navy.
And Navy. Okay. Yeah. So you really did want to be Top Gun. That makes sense. And then the other one was be a veterinarian. So,
right. Which I could have done in the Army.
Yeah.
Army's the only branch that has veterinarians. I mean, well.
That's what you get.
Right?
I'm not, you know what? I'm not even sorry for you. I'm joking. Okay. Cool. So backup plan was veterinarian, and obviously you chose.
So I didn't get accepted to any of the service academies. So now it's senior year. They all turned me down. So now I'm full steam ahead towards vet school, applying for I spent so much time on these application processes for the academies. There's a lot of steps, right? That I hadn't applied for scholarships. But I had got accepted to a vet school in Minnesota. So I was trying to get scholarships for that. We just didn't have a lot of money at the time, and it was, so fast forward to the, right before I knew I didn't get accepted, I was on one of my last interview steps where I had to go get the physical fitness test and interviewed by a liaison officer. So I was taking my prized 86 Camaro I'd worked another summer for to the big town of Duluth, Minnesota, which is not a big town either, but it has more than one traffic light.
So we're not just going to pass up talking about that Camaro, are we?
Oh, no.
Okay, because that sounds... I want to hear that story, too.
Well, yeah, we still have the garage experiences to talk about, and the Corvettes that are now in Florida that were in the garages back then.
Oh, yes.
Right,
so
right?
let's not skip too much and get you right into the Air Force. But
it was only a V6, though.
Okay. Which probably made sense at the time, right?
Yeah, it was all I could afford.
And
2.8 liter, but it was fun. T-top. Replaced the Buick Skylark.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that was hard to get rid of. Okay, so, man, I don't want to be all over the place, but...
We're back to... So I'm in the big town of Duluth, Minnesota.
Okay.
And I ran a red light. 18 years old, on my way to this interview, which was the last most important part, and it was 100% my fault. A woman broadsided me. Neither of us were injured. But the police showed up, my car's totaled, the door, those big, heavy Camaro doors.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so it was bent in the middle, it wouldn't shut. I'm just distraught because I'm like, I have ruined this all. I'm not going to make it to this interview. I did not have a cell phone. I had no way to contact the college. And I'm just, police officer shows up and he says, "Why are you in such a hurry today?" And I told him what I was trying to do, and I will never forget it to this day. He slapped his clipboard down on the hood of his car, and he said, "Sarah, you go to that interview. We're going to deal with this later. You go to that interview right now."
Wow.
So I took that, and that's what I was, my brand, if you will, throughout the military service, is to be that person that can tell people to go, just go. Because I know you've got shit going on in your life. I know something crazy might have happened last night. Just go.
That's huge. And I'm really happy that you told that story, right? There's so often we don't take into account what that person might have going on, right? All we care about is how they affected us, right? How did they ruin our day, whatever it is. But you're right. Everybody's got something going on.
Yes.
So being able to give people some grace and actually hear them out on, hey, why the hurry, right?
Yes.
Give me that. That's so cool. Okay, so he is ultimately responsible for you being able to make it to this interview.
Yes. So the interview happened. I somehow got home. I went to a auto body shop because I couldn't close the door. I'm trying to. Oh, and I remember when I left my Camaro in the parking lot at the university. My biggest fear was that my cassette tapes were going to get stolen. The Kiss cassette tapes and the Def Leppard and
that's a
White Snake and White Lion.
That's a good fear to have, right? Those were it was hard to get those tapes.
Yes.
And we worked hard for them. I guess,
Yes.
some people probably still have them, but most of us don't. We didn't collect them like the baseball cards. I wish they would have kept their value like that, but
yes,
they were valuable to us at that point. Okay.
So I had $20 in my pocket. I think I didn't have a credit card. I went to this body shop, these nice gentlemen. And again, this generosity from other people, they helped me fix the door enough so I could at least close it enough to drive the 2.5 hours back home. But all that said and done, then those 3 service academies turned me down. Well, fast forward to summertime. Now I'm working 3 jobs after senior year to get this money for vet school. 15 days before boot camp, I got a snail mail letter in the mail from the Air Force Academy that says, "We have a spot for you now. Be here in 2 weeks." So my dad and I, he was always my biggest cheerleader. We hopped in that Camaro, and after the door had been fixed, and he drove me out to the academy.
That is okay. What a great story. The veterinarian thing, you started saving up for it. Was that a hard thing for you to, because you kind of made that decision, right? They told you no. So you'd already transitioned and pivoted, if you will, to this is what I'm going to do. Was it hard for you to then turn and go to the academy?
It was not, because I was actually distraught. I really wanted to go because by then I had learned more about what the academies did or what the military did. And I knew it was my ticket out of the state. It was my ticket to adventure, to traveling, to something in life besides just academia.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So as you're going into the military, you're going to be a military officer. Can you kind of talk us through how the Air Force, how they decide that? What is going to be your job?
They help you choose that. The first 2 years at any of the academies, are all your basic engineering and all your foundational courses, and then the second 2 are your core discipline. I chose management. I wanted something to do with people, business. I never wanted to fly, despite Top Gun. I wanted to meet people like the people in Top Gun.
Gotcha.
But I wanted to be on the ground. So I went to my teachers and I said, what's a good people job? And they said security forces or aircraft maintenance. Well, I liked aircraft on the ground. So right. I said, put me in aircraft maintenance. And as a lieutenant, went off to my first duty assignment, and in a 90% male-dominated flight line experience, JP8 world, and started pounding the flight line.
Okay. And that's what I would think. I would think that aircraft maintenance would be a male-dominant field. So what was it about the aircraft maintenance that spoke to you?
It was it was one of it was security forces and aircraft maintenance were known for being the two where, as a young officer, I would have my team from day one. I would deploy very early in the career. And to me, that was very exciting to be able to be part of this, leading a team of people. I loved doing that in high school. I knew that was where my passion was. And that's what I found in that career field, definitely.
Okay. And then I am assuming, because the mechanical background that you had growing up, in the garage with your father, that aircraft maintenance sounds like, hey, so now I'm not working on a car, I'm just stepping it up to an aircraft. Maybe you kind of always had that in your background.
I did like it as an officer. They don't trust us touching those aircraft. But I would go out on the flight line. I would grab my coffee in the morning, hear the engine starting up, smell that JP8, and I would just start getting my hands dirty and say, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing to pull that engine out? Let's see." And they'd be like, "Okay, LT, you can do this part. Here's a wrench." And they would just let me play around with things. So right. That really kind of helped me to get beyond that bias of being a woman, because I never wanted to be seen as a woman. I wanted to be known for who I was as a person.
Right. And how was that? So your first duty station as lieutenant, were you the only leader that was a female?
Pretty much. I remember as a lieutenant, I had, at the time, in my little flight, I think I had about 40 people. So yes, I was leading them. We had a woman squadron commander. She was way up in the echelon. And then the big kicker was Northern Watch, when I deployed, and I was the only woman leading that team of maintainers for working between Germany and Turkey for Northern Watch, and then Southern Watch at the same time. I was with a unit of C-130s, and we were supporting Northern Watch, Southern Watch, one after the other.
Wow.
So it's either Kuwait or Germany.
Right, just bouncing back and forth.
Yeah, bouncing back and forth.
Not a bad area, not bad areas to be, though.
I liked Kuwait better. I remember my third deployment, I had been to one of each, and my commander said, "All right, it's your choice. It's your third one here, and you're going to PCS somewhere else after this one. So which one do you want?" I said Kuwait, because Germany had meetings. Germany had all the BS like in the States.
Yeah.
And Kuwait was just, here's your people, here's your aircraft, here's your flight line, go.
Here's your routine, and absolutely
autonomy.
And you have so much more control over life in deployed than you do in living in Germany. Because like you said, it's just like the States. I mean, everybody goes home at night. Everybody has their family problems, those things going on. But when you're deployed, you get to focus on the mission. And
give me a tent city.
We love it, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that you made it easy or difficult for your personnel to treat you like one of the team? You identified that you were one of few females that were in that career field. Do you feel like you made it easy for them to treat you just like everybody else?
I think it helped driving up to work in the mornings in a 76 jacked up Chevy pickup.
Bingo.
They're like, "LT, you got mud on your uniform again." I'm like, "Yeah, there's some rust in the floorboards." I just tried to be one of the team, but there was some females. I mean, now it's fun. I wear fun nails because I can. I would never have thought to wear makeup or fun nails on a flight line back in those days. And I remember there's this one gal I worked with. She was kind of Hollywoody, and she was really pretty, and she was in aircraft maintenance. And they made fun of her so much because she'd get her hands dirty and she'd get upset. She didn't make it very long.
Okay, so yeah, absolutely. I was thinking kind of along the lines. I'm
sorry if you're listening to this.
Right, thinking back to there are plenty of females that really enjoy getting their hands dirty. Some of them don't, and so that's why I was kind of asking. Did you stand out as one that would? And obviously you didn't. You're part of the team. You're gonna do whatever they're doing. So
yeah,
awesome.
One thing that. I used to deploy with a rubber chicken.
A rubber chicken.
Yes,
Okay.
those kinds you like squeeze and they make the horrible sound, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing was when they started acting like clowns on fire and just getting all stressed out, I'd make them choke that rubber chicken and then they'd laugh. And it brought them down a level of lowering the stress level. And then it became a thing. So it would get stolen. I'd have to pay ransom. I eventually ended up with chicken number 2 because chicken number 1 was killed in action. Chicken number 2 is still missing in action from 9/11 or enduring freedom. And then I still have chicken number 3 at home, and he's got a bunch of inspection tags around his neck. I should have brought him.
You absolutely should have. You should have coined that too.
I forgot about him.
That's funny. Okay, so as you're going through your rotation of chickens,
Yes.
let's briefly talk through your career as in the Air Force.
Sure.
So start us through it. You told us about your first duty station a little bit, but talk us through that and go through the career if you don't mind.
Absolutely. 9/11 happened. So those first 3 years were on slick C-130s in Texas. And then I went to Hurlburt Field. And in 2000, 9/11 happened. And then I was deployed shortly after and to a little island off the coast of Oman called Masira Island. AFSOC owned it, basically. We took it over. We had our tent city and not a very big island. I think the circumference was maybe like a 9-mile run.
So let me understand this correctly. You're in the Air Force and you're living in tents. I didn't think that was supposed to happen. You guys got paid a lot of extra money for that, for those kind of substandard living conditions.
No, that was $350 a day. Remember, $350 a day.
Wow.
Yes.
I figured it would be appalling for the Air Force to live in tents. But I'm sorry. I don't mean to poke jabs.
Now, I did bring my coffee machine and set the coffee machine up in the tent. We had a hookah in the tent. We had a little TV in the tent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were balling out in 2000, and this is Kuwait
Yes.
deployments.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. So, I'm sorry. No, Kuwait was back in 98, 90, 99 for Northern Watch, Southern Watch. And then Oman.
Sorry.
Oman, Pakistan. Yeah. So we're over into that general AOR, obviously. But now I'm in the special ops world. And so part of AFSOC from Hurlburt Field.
How did that graduation happen? Did from your lieutenant time in aircraft maintenance to now you're transitioned over to working with the SOF?
Yeah, so now I'm a captain at this point, and I chose to go to SOF. I was so happy to be there. And then I think that really got me on the trajectory of I'm going to make this a career because I didn't know in the beginning whether or not. I owed 4 years back after the service academy. So now I'm in SOF world and having a blast and having that again, because I always just really, for me, autonomy was what propelled me forward, not somebody trying to put me in a box. So AFSOC was giving me that autonomy. I got put in boxes later when I got into areas like Air Combat Command with fighters. That's a whole different battle space. But early in my career, it was the SOF experiences that molded me and where I have the most memories from. Some good, some bad.
Okay, so going back to the island, right? So your day is on the island. Talk us through just what that deployment looked like.
Absolutely. I remember I latched on to a seasoned senior NCO because I'm still a young captain at this point, still trying to figure things out. But I had my team of maintainers, and I'd have to give my daily briefings, drive the truck around the flight line. So I'd be like, Tom, let's go. And be like, Sarah, well, he called me LT. LT, let's go. And I would latch on to him, and he was like, really guided me into, no, that's a bad decision. We're going to think about this a different way. But through it all, one of my favorite quotes is from Mao, who says, to lead your people, walk behind them. So I spent a lot of time learning my people and learning, because in aircraft maintenance, there's a little trick sometimes that we'll use is we'll pad the ETICs, pad the estimated times of completion, because we don't want the not this operator world, but the pilots and the crews to put pressure on the maintainer to fix that aircraft before it is ready.
That makes sense.
It's a huge back and forth. So I was kind of the one that had to be that mediator to be like, all right, how many hours is that really going to take? We're not going to fib it, but we're also going to give an accurate, and then I'm going to help you stick by that because they're not going to pressure us.
Right. So you're the one that's really protecting the maintainers from being put into that corner of no, fix it now, we're going.
Yes.
And so you protected them. That's an important role, right? Because with that kind of pressure, mistakes happen.
Yes.
Right. And we can't afford mistakes, and especially in aircraft maintenance. So.
No.
Okay, cool. So that paints a decent picture of the roles that you found yourself in and that you put yourself in. So you were, I'm not going to say, you were kind of mom, right?
Yes.
Like you took care of your people, right?
Yes.
And in special operations we say team daddy, team mom a lot, right? So you really filled that role of the team mom, make sure everyone was taken care of.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. Do they have what they need to get the job done? Absolutely. And sometimes, more often than not, we didn't have what we needed. We can talk about a Pakistan story if you'd like.
You tell me.
Okay, so we're still at Masira Island off the coast of Oman, and one of our Hercs was doing a mission up near Jacobabad, up in Pakistan, and they were flying low. The ramp was down, and ramp hit this ledge, and this was the combat shadow, so one of the refuelers.
Okay.
And so the actuators shot up through the fuselage, put holes in the fuselage, ramp stuck, they land, and they were flying out of a base that was a bunch of MH-53 maintainers. Okay. So that Herc was just visiting. So we were kind of like the headquarters of the area. The folks up there called down. They're like, we need a maintainer or a maintenance officer and one maintainer to come up here and fix this Herc. I'm like, one maintainer? Number one, I'm not fixing that. I don't know. But we didn't have the people. You never have enough. So you do with what you have. So I said, all right, I'm going to choose the 7-level sheet metal guy, because sheet metal, they kind of jack of all trades and they think outside of the box.
They're fabricators.
Fabricators, okay. Exactly. And our only job was to get that aircraft fixed well enough to fly it out below 10,000 feet and get it out of there, because it wasn't a safe spot. All the rocket attacks were going on. It was at the very beginning of when the U.S. Went into that base. Okay. So I go up there with my sheet metal guy, and I'll never forget him. He was just amazing. You're like, well, we'll fix this. And my boss is like, you got about 3 days to get that aircraft out of there. I'm like, okay, all right. So we show up, and it was just amazing to see the helicopter maintainers. They weren't signed off to work on a C-130, but we figured out a way to use some of their skills that was still legit. I would sign off on things that, okay, all right, it's not exactly according to book, but we got to get this aircraft out of here, Right. We're going to be safe about it. And I remember we finally got to the point where we were getting ready to get out of there, and I had a forklift with mattresses as dunnage, and we were literally like pushing the ramp up with the forklift to get it closed enough. Right. The holes were just patched on top from where the actuators. We had taken the actuators off. They were laying in the back of the Herc. So then another rocket attack's coming in. We're like, we got to go. Right. The crew had already showed up from somewhere else, and I get my sheet metal guy. I'm like, we got to go. So we load up in there. We didn't even have time to put the jump seats in. I guess the loadmaster was sleeping. I don't know what happened to the loadmaster that day. And I remember I'm laying on a smelly mattress from the dunnage with like my arms wrapped around one of the actuators, because we're going down the freaking runway and it's got potholes, and I'm hearing the rockets going. I'm like, I might not make this. I'm just going to say a little prayer, because I don't know if we're going to make it out of here. We did. Obviously, we did. But you go through those times, and it just gives me those chills to think that I think that when you go through those times, you're just like in this fuck it mode, right? Because you've done what you can do, and I don't have any control over it at this point. You just don't have any control. And then after the fact, it becomes more real. But at the time, it's just like, fuck it, let's go.
You know, it's funny you bring that up, and that's a great time to bring it up. So often when you're in the military, when you were in situations like that where they're beyond your control, we've done everything that we can do to this point. Now it's up to God. We'll see what happens, but you're landing on a runway or running, going down a runway where there's rockets right in your face, just bouncing, and it's absolutely scary. This can absolutely crash at any time, but we've done the best that we can do, training, the pilots, training the maintainers, training the sheet metal guy to fabricate and be able to make these calls on the ground. But how many times over a career were you in situations where it's like, fuck it, might be today, right? And I think that's what a lot of our watchers might not understand. A lot of the civilians, it's like you were put in that position a lot of times, or you had to say, this might be my last day. And when we start talking about operator syndromes, specifically and different things like that, it's from those conglomerations, from that multitude of times you've had to say fuck it and be comfortable saying fuck it and be able to sleep that night. You know what I'm saying? So you said a lot with that. Okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over.
No, it's good.
You guys doing all right?
Quill's giving me some extra love.
I saw that.
Yes.
So we'll introduce
yes.
Quill into the picture.
Quill senses stress by smelling cortisol.
He is awesome. Mm-hmm. And the audience will get to know him a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
When we interview, when we get Keith on here. So let's continue on. So how many years did you do total in the military?
26.
26. Okay, so you came in, you said
18.
circa at 18 years old, and that was 93.
Well, they didn't count the 4 years of the academy, so I guess 30 if you count those. 26 active duty.
26 active duty.
97. I came in from the academy.
Okay, so as we're going through those, you got into your special operations career as your second duty station. Did you ever leave SOF once you got in? You did. Okay, and I've always been really concerned about this, especially when I see some of the enablers that we get in special operations, right? In the Army, we'll get people from, this is their first duty station, and they spend their first 3 or 4 years with SF, and then they have to transition into the regular Army. And I've always been concerned about how that would look, right? It doesn't usually translate well, the regular Army and SF. They're not one and the same in a lot of cases. Is it similar in the Air Force, or what was that like for you?
It's a little different just because aircraft maintenance, you're expected to go on any airframe.
Okay.
So for me, 4 years in AFSOC at Hobart Field, and then I got I went to Korea for a year. Now I'm in F-16 world, hotshot world.
Ooh, you made it Top Gun.
Yeah. Yes. And then back to Eglin, back into SOF again. Okay. Before going into command tours. Okay,
so it was just that year in Korea with the 16s that you left SOF?
I'm sorry. No, when I came back to Eglin, I was back with F-15s. That's right. Yes.
With 15s at Eglin. Okay, so you said so after that rotation. After that island rotation, is that where it took you to Korea after that?
Not quite. I did about 3 more years in SOF after that deployment. Well, a couple more of those deployments. And then after that was the year in Korea. And that was a major shift of, a major military shift, because fighter world is a whole nother ballgame. But it wasn't really, and what I had learned in SOF was actually very relevant to that world too.
Okay, so obviously the command structures, I mean, they're similar. There shouldn't be too many differences,
Right.
but it's more of a culture thing
Yes.
than it is. I mean, you're still in the Air Force, but the culture in special operations, at least in the Army, is considerably different than in the regular Army. And so, and then now you're going to Korea as well. So you're going to a much smaller command that is further away from the flagpole. It's its own thing over in Korea. So I would assume there would be a shock to be had, but at the same time, when I know my time in Okinawa, we were like a family. So even though you were, I mean, I was in SF over there, but we treated, everybody over there seemed like we were on the island together, right? And so I would think Korea would have been the same for you with that.
Very much so, especially in the southern part of South Korea. Kunsan Air Base, very small. Yeah, very tight-knit community.
What did you think of Korea?
I loved it. And I've been there many times since, further on in the career. That was the first time continuously for a year, but I absolutely love South Korea.
Right on. Okay, I'm a fan of Korea too.
Yes.
What do you like about Korea that I know you keep going back for work, but what is it that you really like about that place?
I love the culture. I love the fact that I could be in a restaurant in any town and put my wallet on the table and come back an hour later and it's still going to be sitting right there. I love the respect that the Koreans have for each other, their work ethic. It's such a hardworking country, and their history of what they've been through. I mean, it's incredible to just that small country, that pen, they've been through a lot and they've come out ahead.
Yeah. Being a world traveler, being able to spend time in a lot of these other cultures, how does that translate to you when when you come back from South Korea and you're back in Fort Walton Beach and you see that the cultural differences? What are the things that you miss from Korea when you come back here that you kind of wish we would adopt from their culture?
I miss the level of trust that they have for each other in that country and the respect shown. And regardless of age, regardless of what kind of vocation they have, there's this mutual friendliness. You walk into a little Mama San restaurant and "Annyeonghaseyo," and everything's just, it doesn't matter if you have 4 stars on your shoulder or you just came out working at the janitor's closet. It's mutual respect across that entire spectrum of people. I wish we could do more of that in the U.S.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. Okay, so as you got into command, what's that now looking like? You're going from being just one of the guys out on the, walking the flight lines, padding the maintainers a little bit and getting to play mom, to where now you got to go to, they say it's lonely at the top, right? So,
Yes.
So what's command like?
Yes. And I did want to touch on one thing too, about just before we step into command, if that's okay. I always felt like coming back to the U.S. was harder than being at those deployments or being, in the other countries, because, and I went through 2 failed marriages and just the life at home to me was harder than the life deployed. And maybe that's just because life is simpler when you're deployed. You only are worrying about the mission. Well, you're worrying all about the mission.
Yeah.
And you just don't have daily icky life. So I always wanted to get back out on the road. I was like, stick me out there again. Didn't really work so well for staying married, but That's okay. That's okay.
And that's, you bring that up. We talk about how strong of, how strong of a wife it takes to be married to a Green Beret. We talk about that quite a bit. And really, it takes a strong partner to be married to anybody that's deploying all the time. Right? Every time we deploy, if we're gone for 6 months or a year, that's 6 months or a year that I've changed while I was doing this 6 months or a year, and you've changed during that time, and you stack enough of those on top of each other, and now we don't know each other anymore. And I agree with you that deployment life, it was much easier than it is to live here every day, and have to live that lifestyle. So for our spouses, they absolutely had a harder time than we did. It's just, sure, we were out and today could be our last day, and every day's like that. So there's a lot of stress that comes along, with living that. But we had easier lives than our spouses did. So I'm glad you brought that up. When did you get married? When was your first marriage?
My first one was when I was at Hurlburt Field, and I met this Alabama cowboy. Beautiful. This was when I was in my horse years. I found a ranch in Baker, and thought at the time, I still didn't know if I was going to make it there for the military career. And I'm like, they've got this little ranch. Maybe I can learn how to ride a horse. Met the cowboy, married the cowboy.
Developed the accent.
Yeah, that, right?
Everything.
Learned how to barrel race. Had a lot of fun. It was a season. And then when I got those orders to Korea is when that one fell apart.
Okay, so you were still real young.
I was mid-20s. I was young, right?
Sure.
I thought I wanted this life, and it didn't end up being the life that I pictured. Okay,
and then how long of a split did you have between that marriage and your second marriage?
Quite a while. Got to do math on a podcast, Ryan.
Just general.
15 years ish. Yeah. Was happy on my own. Yeah, and probably should have stayed that way.
So you were focused on the job. I have to assume you.
Yes.
If you weren't married for those 15 years and you didn't have kids with your ex, so that was your life, was the job.
Correct. 100%. 100%. Yeah.
Not a bad way to live. So again, it's not like you're leaving somebody at home to go do all these deployments. For a little bit, I was feeling like you were trying to be away from somebody with all these deployments, but no, that wasn't the case. You wanted to be out with the team. If they were out there, you wanted to be there as well.
Yes.
I appreciate that. How many deployments did you do prior to doing your command time?
Let's see. 6 or 7.
6 or 7. And were they all Kuwait, Germany?
Oman.
Ramstein.
Yeah, Germany. Some shorter trips for aircraft investigations into South America. But true deployments, longer than short term. 6 or 7.
Okay, longer than 30 days.
Right.
Now, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria.
Yeah, none of that, because by then I was in command. I wasn't allowed to deploy anymore.
Okay, yeah. So out of those deployments, Kuwait's the hottest, Korea's the coldest, Germany's got the best beer.
Yes.
All right, summarize a couple of those. Was there anything that really stood out to any one of those things?
I like putting the camel spiders in the box with the scorpions to see who won. Did you ever do that?
No.
No? Was that an Air Force thing?
Probably.
And then the dub lizards, the big green ones that my crew chiefs would put their noose over the hole in the morning, and when the sun came up, the lizard sticks its head out of the hole.
And snare them, huh?
And then walk them around, and they get all bright yellow when they get mad.
I think I have maybe 6 or 7 total nights in Kuwait.
Okay.
Anytime I landed there, I was trying to get out as soon as I could. I was always passing through because it was so hot. I did not like that.
It was hot. By the way, the scorpion always wins. against a camel spider.
I've heard a lot of things about camel spiders. I've seen a lot of scorpions, and yeah, it would make sense that scorpions almost have armor.
Right.
They're armored, so it would, yeah.
I can share an embarrassing story from Germany.
So what happened in Germany?
I got a DUI.
Okay.
So, yeah, so we got to backtrack again now. So I'm a first lieutenant, second deployment, and we've got our Hercs at Ramstein, and we're living at Sembach, so we were a little ways away from the base, and on the weekends we would go out and party on the town. And I had one of the few vehicles because one of the few rental vehicles. So at that time there was like a consolidated club where all the officers enlisted we'd hang after on Friday night. And this one night we decided to go down to this bar, and I'm like, I'll drive us all. I'll be the DD. Well, we get there, and I had a glass of wine, German wine, probably bigger than a pour, one pour, and a beer, I remember. And anyway, by the end of the night, we pile in my vehicle. It's like a station wagon or something. And then a bunch of other drunk folks from the base piled in because nobody had rides home. And so now I've got like 8 people crammed in the station wagon. And I pull out into the street right in front of this bar, and I go the wrong way down a one way. And right there, the bullseye, right away there on me, right? And the windows come down. I mean, the car must have smelled like a frickin',
like Oktoberfest.
Yes, exactly. So I got pulled in the police station, failed the breathalyzer. But the worst part about the whole thing, and thank goodness it did happen early enough in my career where I had time to recover from that.
Right.
But I felt so bad because my home base wasn't able to send a replacement person. They yanked me out of the country, sent me home to let the UCMJ deal with me. And, which was good because I didn't want the Germans putting me in jail.
Yes.
Right. So that was better. But I felt so bad because now my people, we were only like a month into that, I think it was 3 or 4 month tour, and, they didn't have their leader there anymore. And I let them all down. And I set a bad example. I'm no longer there. I'm an embarrassment. I went pretty dark for a while after that and then I thought my career was probably over too at that point.
And that's and I'm glad you told that story actually. I think a lot of people don't understand how the UCMJ works.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're in the military, a DUI is something that is absolutely career ending. You mentioned that it happened early enough in your career. So as a lieutenant, as a first lieutenant, you're generally looked at as a brand new private. You can get away with a little bit more. You're going to make mistakes. Everybody's going to step on it at some point in their career. The thing is, you just got to do it early enough in your career so you can recover, right? Because as you started to say, like once you get into command, once you make a certain rank, you're expected to act a certain way, and we don't make those kind of mistakes anymore, right? And so, although there are tons and tons of guys that had DUIs that ended up getting promoted right after. Some guys had multiple DUIs, and then I've watched some of my best friends get kicked out of the military because of one, right? Mm-hmm. One simple thing, like what you're talking about, right? I had 2 beers and I was the DD, and it ruined his career, like 18 and a half years. And it's like, sorry, dude, you're done. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm really happy you mentioned that. So, okay. So obviously you recovered from that. Was that the worst time you've ever stepped on it throughout your career? As
far as getting in trouble?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So you learned from that?
Yes. Scared the shit out of me. I had to ride my bicycle to work for a year too.
That's just funny. I mean, that's fun.
I could drive to the base, right? And then I had to park my truck outside and ride the bike.
I think we need to do more things like that. You learn your lesson.
Oh, it's so embarrassing.
Little humiliation.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Okay. So when you got into when you were up for command, what does that look like? Do you now change jobs? Mm-hmm. So you're no longer going to be walking the airline, patting the people. What does this now look like? What does it mean?
You're still in charge of an aircraft maintenance unit, but it's a squadron or a group. So like our squadron's about anywhere from 50 to 500, and our 600 people, a group being 3,000. So it would be a squadron command of a aircraft maintenance squadron or group. And then you've got your wing, which is, of course, is your leading the entire echelon. So still aircraft maintenance, in short, to answer that. But now you're in command of a whole lot of people and no room for mistake.
So you're the decision maker.
Yes.
And it's your signature, your butt on the line for everything. So when you're talking about a maintenance squadron, I can't even imagine a dollar figure that you would be responsible for with all that, right? Are you signed for ultimately for all of that stuff? Is that the kind of responsibility that we're talking? Like you owned the equipment, or
not owned, but responsible more for the safety and security of it, of those aircraft on the flight line, morale and welfare of your people, and so not so much like an engineer where you might actually own that equipment, but it's put under your stewardship.
Okay. That now you mentioned something, morale and welfare of your personnel, right? You understood it as a lieutenant. Being a female, I think in my opinion that would be helpful. You liked that position of being the team mom, and now you're in command. How is that translating? You've got a bunch of war fighters that you've got to keep them mentally, physically straight so they can go fight those wars, because this is the height of GWAT, right? And you're in command. Suicides, mental health things. These are really starting to become rampant. Not become, right? Suicide's always been a thing in the military, at least for as long as I've been in, right? We've heard 22 a day, but I think during this time was really the height of mental health, suicide. How are you dealing with that in command?
Well, one story, and because one of your responsibilities is to be the officer that lets the family know.
Yes.
Right. So I was in California at the time, and I got called in, and you got to go see the chaplain, you get your service, your class A's out, and you got to go do the death notification. Well, and this kid was 19 years old, brand new, and in the military. And so myself, the chaplain, and a doc, we got in the vehicle. We had to drive like 2 hours because we had to go to this tiny little town in California.
Because you're going to do it face to face.
Face to face with the mom. Yeah, dad was out of the picture. Mom was there. And you don't know at the time if the mom or if the family knows. They might have indication, but you know that you're going to be that first official person to deliver the news, right? So that was super hard. So I remember, I don't even think the three of us talked on that trip, because we were just like, you just know that you showing up is going to change this person's life forever. And we got to the town, we drove into this trailer park, and we saw the woman, and there was a bunch of people standing around her, and we park, and I see it as clear as day to this day. And we get out and we start walking towards her, and all I'm thinking is, and you have your rehearsed thing you have to say, right? And walking towards her, like across that expanse of like 20 feet, and she's looking at you, and just, you don't want to say it. We're here to inform you. And I went up there and I said it, and she just about fell. I mean, she fainted almost. Her family's there. And then It goes on from there, but it's just like it breaks your heart. It really breaks your heart to have to be that person. So,
yeah, it's really unimaginable, right? How do you deliver? I mean, knowing that you have to deliver that message, but also having to be the person that does that, right? I mean, as the commander, you have to show strength within.
Yeah, and you can't cry. You can't cry. You're like stoic. But then what I did is, because of how that one affected me, and I only had to do one of those. It was just that one. But at commander's calls, I would share that story, like on a Friday afternoon or before a long weekend. I would share that story and I would paint that picture, and I'd see the emotion out in the crowd, and I'd say, before you get behind the wheel of your vehicle this weekend, I want you to remember that story, and I want you to think of that mom.
I bet those went so far with with all the members of your unit, those kinds of talks. I remember our safety briefs. A lot of times it was more of it's always a check the block, right? Hey, if you drink, don't drive,
Right.
call somebody. And really we check the block on those things just to say that we did them. But if you would take,
It just goes over your head. Yeah.
you're right. And if you would take 5 minutes and tell a story, something that would hit home and just kind of bring people back to just right here, right here. Let's really put into put some thought into what we're doing, right? Have a plan with what you're doing.
Yeah, and if it's going to make one person think, that's enough.
Continuing on with your command, was it Hurlburt?
No, command was Grand Forks. I was up there with the refuelers, KC-135s.
Okay.
They're not there anymore. And then the second one, it was back-to-back commands, was Air Education and Training Command. So that's schoolhouses for the Air Force.
Where's that?
The headquarters was in Wichita Falls, Texas. But I had 23 detachments all over the world, field training detachments. So different schoolhouses that were training maintainers.
So you traveled a lot during that.
Yes. That was when I had a F-350 at the time, because I'd be cruising around the country and I got my dog and all my stuff and need to be safe, right?
Right. So command, when you were in the schoolhouse, a lot of command visits, a lot of emphasis on what's going on training wise. Are there a lot of things changing during that time because of the way the wars were? We're learning stuff every day, right? So are you guys consistently having to change TTPs and the way you did things, or?
It was more, the TTPs were more status quo because they were fitted to the mission of where that field training detachment was. So we're going to teach these 7 levels how to effectively troubleshoot. That's not going to change too much. Now, where I see that changing a lot these days is with a lot of the swapping boxes out on aircraft, because you don't need the skill level in some areas that you needed back then to troubleshoot, because the computer's troubleshooting it for you. I think I'm digressing there.
Yeah, and I think my question was probably probably wasn't the best question. Okay, so when you're in command of the training house, ultimately you'd mentioned all the outstations that you're responsible for. So you're overseeing, kind of check on training all the time, hence traveling.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, what was your last duty station?
My last was back into SOF world, so MacDill Air Force Base.
Okay, so out in Tampa. And what were you doing out there?
I was in the J4 Logistics Directorate.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So logistics, squadron, so maintenance to logistics, right?
Correct. Well, I mean, pretty much the last 8 years of my career, I'm past command now. I'm doing staff work. So I did a tour with the Joint Staff J7, and that was advising and training, traveling around the world, advising combatant commanders on best practices during their exercises and such. That was a lot of fun. And then finishing up at MacDill, where, there's no really such thing as aircraft maintenance. You're just in the logistics world. But it's still similar in that the operators need this there. We got it over here. It's not just going to magically disappear. So we got to figure out how to get the operators what they need to do the mission.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So how many years did you end up there at MacDill before you retired?
3.
So you did 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad place to do your, what would we call it, your twilight tour,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Did you retire right there?
I did. Well, not physically. I went up to Minnesota. So I mentioned earlier, my dad was my biggest cheerleader. He passed away a while back now. And I guess, he drove me out. He dropped everything. I'll tell you a Corvette story after this.
Okay.
But I wanted to retire on his birthday and up in Minnesota for him. So instead of being around a bunch of rent-a-crowd, I did it up there with family.
Beautiful. Okay, so retire in Minnesota. What does a retirement in Minnesota look like?
I will say I had to get help from the locals, right? So I had to call up the ROTC detachment at one of the universities, and I called my best buddy, retired Major General, has been my mentor since I was a captain. I said, I need you to retire me. Can you make it? Absolutely, Sarah. To this day, I can, text him and he'll be in freaking like Afghanistan and he'll call me.
That's awesome.
There. So yeah, I just used the resources I had there at that location, which was awesome.
I think that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, let's take just a quick break.
Okay.
Take a quick breath. And so MacDill being your last duty station and wrapping up a 26-year career, how does the Air Force, how did they do that? Do you feel like they do it right? How did that go for you?
Not just the Air Force. I feel that now Department of War, I feel that the programs for SkillBridge, for transition, have really been codified over the recent years, over the last 5-6 years. And there's a lot of programs out there for people to take advantage of in that transition space because, yes, it's a whole new world.
There's definitely been vast improvements. I won't disagree with you. When I transitioned, it was really on me. It was like, you're an adult, dude. You gotta figure this out, right? Start making appointments, start doing the things for you, or work until the last day. Whatever you want to do. Like no one really forces your hand. You were in Air Force Special Operations transitioning. You're a senior leader. I have to assume it was similar.
It was, and I started my transition about a year out from the official retirement date. I had a lot of leave that I had saved up, but like you just said, Ryan, it was very hard to leave the old JOB because you feel such dedication to it, and you feel like you're going to walk out and everything's going to fall apart, right? Oh, it doesn't. You walk out that door and you're replaced so fast, nobody remembers your name. But to emotionally and mentally, individually accept that is very hard because that's all we've done our whole lives. So that took me a bit. I think taking some leave before I started a transition program was kind of key because it was forced me to get into a little bit more of my mental space of, okay, it's time to take care of me now. Now, I was luckily in a staff position at SOCOM where I could do that easier than, for example, some of my friends who were leaving command and leaving jobs that definitely maybe needed them to be physically there more often than not and still trying to transition.
Well, was it very often you saw people coming back from a deployment going right into retirement mode?
Oh, yes. And I feel that was one of the biggest struggles because now that's a whole nother layer. Now they're getting back from a different chapter of life. Not only are they transitioning, maybe they're reassimilating into their family and their families trying to figure out how to deal with this transition. The spouse that was used to that kind of lifestyle or moving frequently, and now all of a sudden their significant other is going to be home all the time. So there's a lot of dynamics in that, I think. But the programs that are out there are really key to helping these veterans figure out the next chapter of life.
Well, let's talk through some of the things that you found helpful for you.
The biggest one for me, it was the DOW SkillBridge program. And that is a sanctioned program where the veteran signs up and you go intern with a company. I did it with the Global Special Operations Foundation, GSOF, which is the same organization that's running the symposium that we're at this week here in Fort Walton Beach, the SAWS, Special Air Warfare Symposium. Their next big one is the Special Operations Forces Week in May. That's the one where they bring in all different countries, and that's their biggest of the year. So I did an internship with them for 4 months. Started to learn how to be a civilian. Stu Braden, he's the CEO of GSOF, and he would literally take me under his wing, and you'll meet him out there when we go out to SAWS. Just amazing individual that. Resume help, interview help. Let's not talk in acronyms help. Just all the things that we don't operate in the civilian space. So I did that, and then I jumped into some other ones that were recommended by the SOF community, the Honor Foundation, STAR, which is Special Operations Transition Assistance Resource, and then another one that was focused on industry called 4Block. So all of those were very different from each other. The Honor Foundation is the starting point for most veterans that come out of the SOF world. And it's for operators, it's THF, they're all over the country. And they are specifically bringing in operators to the fold to start teaching all those skills. And again, it's mock interviews, it's figuring out your why. That's their biggest focus there is, why you did what you did in your military service, but now you have to figure out your new why. And a lot of that is diving very deep into that. And then STAR is kind of more a PhD version of the whole transition, where you've got half of CEOs from the special operations community or business in the local area. In this case, it was Tampa. And then the other half is our operators. And so you interview into that, you get accepted, and now you're basically joined up with a CEO that takes you under their wing and helps you move along in that process. So those were invaluable to me. I highly would recommend them to any transitioning member. And a lot of them, too, is they're bringing in previously retired operators that know the language, know the stressors, and know where those people are at and maybe where they need to be, and help you figure out your why.
That's very the way you describe that, figuring out your why. A lot of people struggle to find their purpose, and with what you talked about, the Honor Foundation helping you find your why behind it, I think that's huge. So how did you find out about these programs? When I was retiring, I don't remember hearing a lot about them. How did you find out about these resources? SOCOM
particularly has a very well-established care coalition program that also helps with your disability process and assigns you a VSO to help with that whole thing. And then they were the ones that you walk into their offices and you got the pamphlet there. What's this? And then so those folks that are in that position, in SOCOM specifically, so I will say out of all the major commands, SOCOM does it best for transition, which I think is maybe important because SOCOM our special operations is so diverse, and it's not one AOR. It's people that did this over here and this over here and this back here. And so SOCOM's done a very good job of bringing in all of those entities into one location at the headquarters.
And is that basically the STAR program that you're talking about?
STAR's one of them. Yeah.
So the resources are there. It's probably what you're telling me is they were there. I just didn't see them. Perhaps. Okay. Touche.
Well, and but then again, it goes back to what were you doing at that position? Because you may not have had the time to dedicate to those resources, perhaps.
So you said you started roughly a year out with your transition. were you able to do these programs in that year? So basically your command allowed you to go be part of the Honor Foundation, and that's now your day-to-day, helping you learn to be a civilian.
You're still working or you're on leave, because these are mostly evening programs. Yeah. So you're putting more on your plate, definitely. And in my case, I was working for a while doing the evening courses, and then I would take leave for a while. And then, but looking back, I probably would have tried not to take so much leave, because that's worth a lot of money when you retire. Right. And I had no idea. But yeah, so they're piled on top of what you're currently doing.
Okay, so you are adding a little bit to the plate.
You are, except for the DOW skill bridge. That's an internship, so your command does release you for that one.
And I've heard about the internships,
right?
And
right.
I heard you mention that, and I thought the Honor Foundation generally was one of those internships, but I might be wrong.
They're an evening event we typically would go from 6 to 9, 1800 to 2100 at night at a central location, off base. Okay,
so probably the internships you mentioned, they'll do, I guess they would be kind of working groups where you're getting introduced to the CEOs of these Fortune 500 companies. Would that be considered one of those internships where you're basically getting groomed by one of these?
Correct. And I did it with GSOF.
What's that look like? Do you mind just kind of giving us a good...
So at the time, I thought I was going to get into event planning post-retirement. So I found GSOF and I became one of their event planners for the Special Operations Forces Week 3 years ago. So they put me in that battle space. Now there are people that think they want to get into contracting or work at Lockheed Martin or any of these big companies, and there are separate internships with those as well. So they all look a little bit different, but the program allows you to apply for the one of interest to you.
Okay, so your application process, do you remember much about that?
It wasn't easy. I went to... Well, I guess, we always forget the TAP, Transition Assistance Program, is the one mandatory one that every service has to do. Right. And it's kind of the kicking off point, and they teach you how to go through that application process. But it is a little bit lengthy, and I remember just pulling my hair out, and I'm like, I don't know, let me just retire. I'll figure it out. I relied a lot on my friends, people that were already going through it at the same time as me, trying to surround myself with smart people and be like, come on, help me out here.
Right. Well, the unfortunate truth is we don't know what we're going to go through. And most of the people that we're working with, they're not retired. So they don't know what we're going to go through. So we do need to be able to depend on those people that went before us. Good stories, good conversations like this. What does that application process look like? How early do you need to start it? Are you doing interviews? What should your demeanor be? What should really what your mindset should be going into that? You need a mentor for that. Mm-hmm. The shooting from the hip mentality that a lot of us, or at least I did, when I retired, I didn't take advantage of a lot of those things that were in TAPS. I did the mandatory things. Yeah. And of course, that's all on me. It's not on the military, and I will never blame, anybody for that. But what we're trying to do here is definitely educate. I did it the wrong way. It sounds like you did it the right way. So just curious about what those processes looked like for you.
Sometimes I can be a big pain in the ass. So I would go over to that TAP building and, be like, who do I need to talk to get this done? Oh, that person's not working today. Go back the next day. It's so-and-so here. I need to figure this out. So I think sometimes the squeakiest wheel gets the most grease. Okay. I would recommend that to anybody. Absolutely persistence and don't believe the no. Find the right person that can give you the yes. It goes back to my initial, when I was 18 years old, just go, let's do this. I think that that person really needs to at least a year out. Ultimately, people say 2 years out. I believe that's pretty hard to do, to start at that point in time. Maybe mentally, maybe reading some of the literature books at 2 years out, but that's hard. I think that we are so focused and concentrating on what we're doing that current day that it's hard to step away. But also a lot of deep down introspection of, who do I want to be in this next world? Do I want to continue working in the building with no windows? Do I want the 6-figure job in the contractor world? Or do I want to go out into the community and start a nonprofit? There's so many things. So figuring out that why, to me, that Honor Foundation taught, which is led by Dan and Stephanie Snyder in Tampa, that to me was when it clicked in my brain of when I started to figure out why. Because I had no idea. Obviously, I wasn't going to go back to veterinarian school at that point.
Well, which you could, though, right? Like, you were set up, I'm sure.
8 years of... I am working on my PhD now, but that's only 4 years, not 8.
Okay, so going back to your last couple of years what was your mental health like?
My mental health was stressed out. I was just like, I have this known entity that I've known since I was 18 of being told what to wear, where to go, who to work with, where to, all the things, where to live. And now I have to figure this all out on my own. And I don't have a job, and I'm tired. Like, I'm just tired. I'm tired. I just want to maybe just go away and take a sabbatical for 2 years. I think sometimes if people have that opportunity, that's a great thing, but who really has that opportunity to just step away from the world for 2 years or a year or whatever? So it's stressful. It's stressful. I drank a lot more than I should have in that transition year, because that's my way to quiet my brain. And at night, getting that bottle of red wine out and be like, the next morning, there was a wine thief in my house last night. I didn't, because your brain, and my brain is just always moving a million miles an hour. Yeah. So it's like forcing myself to slow it down and figure it out. And that's what I found in Firewatch.
Well, going back to that time, right? Now you're trying to quiet your brain. You went from a multitude of deployments, which means a multitude of changing your cycle, right? Your internal cycle. Our time zones are vastly different. When you do that a multitude of times, right, it stacks on you. There's plenty of studies out there showing that being in those high stress situations, that constant travel like we did, it takes its toll on you, and it keeps your mind in a bit of a tailspin. So a lot of us do find ourselves using alcohol to quiet that cycle. And now those fears that you're facing, they're real fears. You gotta come up with your new purpose. Again, not being told what to do. It's kind of like getting out of the house for the first time. Yeah. It's all on you. So let's get into Firewatch. Tell me about that and how that came to be.
Absolutely. So as a result of that transition process, I was pretty set in my why. If I wanted to find something where I could continue to give back to veterans and support my community. And I started my own company called Shining Star Network, LLC, just from scratch, which was that idea. I was going to develop this placard that businesses could put on the outside of their business, advertising that they offered a 10% discount to a veteran, law enforcement, or first responder. And I had a GoDaddy page. I mean, it was just, I had no idea what I was doing. I've never been an entrepreneur. And so then I had this Firewatch magazine sitting on my read pile. And I'm one of those old school newspapers. I really like my hard copy, personally. I opened it up. I looked at who the publisher was, and I called him up and I said, "Hey, I want to advertise my brand new company with you." He said, "All right, let's meet for lunch." And the next week I met him and his wife, wonderful people, Steve and Stacy Roderick. And 2 hours later, they said, "We'd rather hire you. We see what you're doing. We're already doing that. We've been doing that for 3 years with Firewatch. So why don't you just come work for us?" So I did. So that was last October. And
Under what capacity were you working?
Business development director.
Okay, so what did that look like?
I was bringing in content for them for the magazine. I was interviewing different veteran support entities. I was working a lot of their logistics and whatever they needed me to do. I did a lot of networking because they didn't love the networking piece. So they'd be like, Sarah, go support that. Go do that. Go do that. Go talk us up. Go work this event.
Okay. And how were the stories being chosen at that point?
We had different subjects that we would, at the time it was a printed magazine once a month. So we had like the canine corner, we had the mental health corner, we had the suicide, we had all these different corners. And so we would bring in different writers to share their stories. And then we had our advertisers that were supporting them with paid advertisements in the publication. But primarily it was a magazine and we were printing out thousands of copies per month that were going into mailboxes and distributing them. And then I was out in the community promoting it.
How was the distribution being handled?
Literally through the mail. Or we partnered with the American Legion, one of the local posts in Tampa at the time that had a route to distribute these magazines. So a combination of mail, direct mail, and distribution, physical distribution.
So locally, just drop in people's mailboxes.
And that's how I first got it. I was Googling veteran support magazine or something like that when I started Shining Star, and it came up in the Google search and it said $19 a year, and I signed up and it came to my mailbox. And so I just happened upon it by stance.
Yeah, opportunity just happened to fall in your lap.
Literally.
Literally.
It did. And I loved working for them. Well, Steve and Stacy are business people to the core. They have flipped many businesses. They're super smart. So they got Firewatch. Firewatch was dying on the vine when they bought it, and they turned it around to make it more successful. But then they decided to go on another venture, and they called me one day, and Steve's like, I think we're going to sell Firewatch. And I was so sad. I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. Well, no. And he said, well, you can come on our next venture with us. And I slept on it. And the next morning I called him back and I said, how about I buy it? So we made a deal. And now I've bought the house and I'm putting my own furniture in it.
Wow. Okay. So congratulations on that. Now, when did that officially happen?
April.
Okay. April of 25.
Correct.
Okay. So you've had it going on 10 months now, 10, 11 months.
Yeah.
Now, how have you morphed it? So did you understand the original idea when it was created before Steve and Stacy got it?
I did.
And then so you saw the implemented changes. You were part of the implemented changes under them.
Correct.
And then how did it morph overall? From where it began? Can you just kind of talk me through what the original idea was and then where it's at now?
So it started out as just this network of people and organizations that had veteran resources. So different medical institutions, American Legions, legal help, financial help, transition help. And it was just basically a conglomeration of these entities held together by a publication. And then when Steve and Stacy evolved it, they grew it more into a revenue base where they could bring in more businesses to support the venture, which as a result allowed them to tie deeper into veteran support initiatives and then branch out to the law enforcement first responder aspect, and also partner with more nonprofits to increase awareness, because the nonprofits really have the greater reach of exposure.
Okay, and I like that you've brought in the law enforcement in this conversation. I meant to during the intro because I think that's a big piece to it, right? It's not just veterans of military service; it's also first responders and firefighters, right? Law enforcement, which absolutely, I mean, we should all tie together because our transitions are difficult. We're having to find that new purpose, and as you've mentioned, our new why behind it. Yes. So that's awesome. So from where Steve and Stacy had it, and now that you've taken full ownership, your furniture, how much different does it look?
I stopped doing print. It was very expensive. And I found after consulting with the current, I call them clients, the advertisers, that there's no way to give them analytics. There's no way to tell those folks that are your revenue stream how many readers it's getting, or the even the demographics and all the things. You just can't collect analytics from print. Now, I mentioned I love print,
Right.
but it's not a good business model. So I did away with the print. I put those efforts into the digital space, and I built a new business model with a lot of help from YouTube videos, talking to people, reading, because I didn't know anything about, website build, WordPress, SEO, all the meta, all the things that are out there right now that can help a digital publication flourish. So I did a lot of research, threw out some ideas, kept some others. I'm still learning new stuff every day, obviously, of course. I've reached out to like-minded entities like Firewatch. I'm number 8 in the country right now, but I want to get it up there as far as a veteran publication. Yeah. So in short, Steve and Stacy had built a wonderful foundation. And so I was just able to keep what they already had going. I mean, the website was well done, and I can call either one of them to this day and be like, I need help with this. How do I do this SEO? Whatever it may be. And I also kind of streamlined the effort. So instead of trying to get so many different articles, I focused on certain aspects and put more effort into less things.
Okay. How do you choose those stories then? So as you've started streamlining it, how do you decide?
My biggest effort in this business is the networking piece. I'm at things all the time. And so in those relationships, I'm meeting the people that need the help. And then I'll be like, oh yeah, I'll connect you with that, or I'll connect you with that. And I'm their connector. I call myself the Patriot Planner.
You're the team mom.
Get back to that. For example, one of my favorite clients is ETMS Florida, and they offer non-invasive transcranial brain therapy to first responders, law enforcement, or veterans. It's normally about $30K on the side. It's 20 sessions of mapping your brain, rewiring your brain. I went through it so I could talk on it, and less anxiety, better sleep. For some, less addiction. It didn't help me that way. I still like my red wine.
Okay.
And just overall better health. So, and now that company, ETMS Florida, they've branched out into other areas of the state, and that they have mobile units because they know that like a first responder can't come to their office for 20 sessions. They got to bring the van to them.
Sure.
So that's one of my favorite. And I'll meet somebody out and about, and they'll mention, any of these things, PTSD, anxiety, and I'm like, here's the card. Call them up, apply. It's free.
Yeah, how's that process? The application process.
Super easy. You could go on the website right now and you'd apply in 5 minutes.
Say it again slowly.
Oh, ETMS Florida, Echo Tango Mike Sierra, Florida. Very easy application process. It would take about 5 minutes to go on their website, apply, and go through the program.
What do I need to? What do you call it? What are the prerequisites?
Just that you had served in any branch of the military, that you have something you're dealing with medically. And I take that back. You may not even know what you're dealing with medically, but you need some kind of help. Maybe you don't have the diagnosis yet. Or if you're a current first responder or law enforcement, that's it.
Okay, so veterans, any law enforcement, first responders that are dealing with any PTS symptoms, you qualify to go get ETMS therapy.
Yes.
Now, for you said 20 sessions. You weren't really dealing with any addiction stuff that you needed to work on. But as far as those, were you having any memory issues, anything like that it really helped you with? What did it really focus on for you?
I do have the PTSD designation. So some of the things under that umbrella is what it helped me with. And the anxiety, the response to certain stimuli. helped me like kind of just slow my brain down a bit and build up more resilience.
A little bit of deprogramming.
Yes, exactly. You said it. That's perfect. Exactly. And that's what the program does. It's literally like this magnet thing that goes on your head and it maps your brain. And then.
Well, during your career, you had to be able to turn the switch on really fast.
Yes.
Right? You were programmed to react to stressful situations. And now to deprogram from that actually takes work, right? To change your makeup. And I think that's one of the therapies that we're seeing a lot of success with.
Absolutely.
I did an episode with a gentleman, Justin. We talked about that. So any of the viewers that are seeing this that haven't seen that episode that are interested, go and check it out. But he had a lot of good things to say about it.
Yep.
Firewatch, what we haven't talked about yet, and you're the one that keeps bringing it up. What's the why?
The why is knowing that I can continue to be that person that can help somebody somehow. And for me, just the biggest thanks at the end of the day is somebody that says thank you. I mean, I'm not money motivated. I mean, yes, I like fast cars, but I'm more intrinsically motivated to, I think God put us on this earth for a reason. And I don't know how many days I have left, but I'm going to use every one of them to its potential to be that person that can give other people that green light. And not only just the green light to say, let's go, but maybe you should be in this lane instead of this lane. And I'm going to help you get there.
What a great answer. I love that. So we haven't had a chance to really talk about the cars and who you are now. So we went through your career and how you grew up and who you used to be. Let's talk about who you are now.
I have 2 wonderful dogs. I have, I've had German Shepherds my whole life. I've done a lot of rescues, and dogs for me have always been a grounding. And they're always the ones that have been there for me, no matter how relationships work out or all those other things. And so they're wonderful.
Unconditional love.
Unconditional love. I have a German Shepherd and a Belgian Malinois Shepherd mix, and they're wonderful. And they keep me a little sane because they are also a lot of work.
The Malinois definitely is.
They are. And I feel like I have done away with some of the friends that are just kind of out there, they're the outliers, and put it kind of like what I did with Firewatch is looking at the stuff that had the most impact and putting more energy into that than trying to do everything across the board, and really focusing on maybe 6 or 7 different really important things and beefing those up. So with my friends, there's so many acquaintances out there, but I like to keep my real friends close, and the ones like my good friend Michelle that's with me on this trip right now. I could call her at 2 a.m. any night and she'd be at my front door. That's what we need.
Yes. I love that. So what are those priorities now?
My priorities are making a difference every day. That's why I started a PhD, because I will probably never use the name. I just want to learn. And so I'm doing the doctorate of business administration, and everything I'm studying there is something related to leadership, ethics, psychology, why leaders made the decisions they made, good ones, bad ones, how did they impact other people's lives, sometimes, for better or for worse. And learning from that, and then being that person that can walk into a room and just up the energy, up the ante, let's go. And I feel like that is just contagious. So I feel that's my why, is bringing that energy and sharing it with others and making a difference at the end of every day.
Okay. I love the idea. I think, we can all take a chapter out of that book, try to be a positive influence every day on somebody's life. And it sounds like that's your why now, and that's your focus. Yeah. Where's this leading?
my dream would be to get into more public speaking and to go into an organization. Maybe they're having issues, or they're not maybe it could be financial, it could be personnel issues, it could be just a lack of motivation from employees or things like that, and be that I don't want to be a consultant, but those are a dime a dozen. Sure. Somebody that could kind of observe and go in and speak and pump them up and read that room, see what's going on in there, and I have this resource for you. I have this resource for you. I have this person you can call, and make those connections. If I could travel around with my dogs around the world doing that, sign me up.
Okay, so the goal, the dream life, is to ultimately be able to go into other veteran-owned businesses, help them find their gaps and plug the holes with the resources that you've been able to align with over your time with Firewatch, and all the connections that you make, and again, being the team mom and helping fix our issues, which I think is phenomenal.
I can't say it any better.
Okay, so before we wrap up, what would you say to a veteran listening right now that feels kind of lost in their transition?
Start with me, firewatchmagazine.com, or Sarah at firewatchmagazine.com, and I will connect you with a business or service you need, or put you in touch with somebody who has that. Let's go.
I love it. All right, Sarah. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your honesty and your stories. I really appreciate the work that you're doing now in the veteran space, staying connected to us, to them, keeping a finger on the pulse of our healing. And to everyone watching, as Sarah was saying, there are resources out there. Reach out to her. Definitely try to stay connected and stay plugged in. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.